Now, I always liked you, Byron. But you never knew when to shut up.
A few years ago, when he was under contract at Central, I seen him and a bunch of other pinks mow down 32 Apache women and children.
Renegades, gunning down railroad men and their families, picking them off the road one by one, scalping.
There was young ones running around crying and screaming, no more than 3 years old. And his boys shot them all, then pushed them into a ditch. Some of them was still crying. But I guess Byron figured that Jesus wouldn't mind. Apparently, Jesus don't like the Apache.
Keep on talking. All the way to Yuma, right up them steps, to the rope, straight to hell.
Day I die, Byron, I'm getting sprung from hell.
Might feel the same if I come from the seat of a drunk gravedigger, the rancid womb of a whore.
Drop it, Dan Evans. Drop it. Toss that to the ground, Doc. Mr. Butterfield. Now, I believe, Dan, you're carrying a pistol as well. I'd appreciate it if you take that out and drop it on the ground. Thank you.
Now, I always liked you, Byron. But you never knew when to shut up. Even bad men love their mamas. Now I think it's time for everybody to go home.
Don't you move, Mr. Wade. Let go of that shotgun.
Hello and welcome to Book vs. Movie. This is a podcast where we read books that have been adapted into movies and then we try to decide which we like better, the book or the movie. I am Margot P. of coloniabook.com and this is my good friend and co-host, Margot D. of Brooklyn Fit Chick.
Hi, everyone.
Today's episode is one that has been on our listener suggestion list for a very, very, very long time. I'm so glad we're finally coming around to it. We're going to be talking about 3:10 to Yuma by Elmore Leonard. Now, before we get to that, and all the old west of it all, if you are brand new, yes, this is a podcast where we talk about movies that have been adapted, yes, from books, also from any literary source. So it could be a magazine article, a short story, a play, a song, a poem. As long as the movie has been adapted from a literary source, as long as the movie is streaming somewhere that we can get our eyeballs on it, and you can too, as long as the source material is available easily for all of us, we will consider it. So if you have suggestions, we do have some gaps in the schedule coming up. So if you have suggestions for upcoming episodes, we would love to know about them. There's a few places where you can share those and meet other listeners of this podcast and interact with us on the internet.
We do have a basic Facebook page. Be sure to like it because the episodes are posted there as soon as we post them to our server. But the best place to interact with us is in our Facebook group, and it's Book Vs. Movie Podcast Group, and you have to ask to join. It's a private group, and we really do just talk about books and movies there. It's a nice, safe space to hang out, good people. So that's a great place to leave your suggestions and look at the ideas other people have. We're also on Twitter, Instagram, and Threads. And there you type out book versus and movie. And then we have an old-timey email, bookversusmoviepodcast@gmail.com. Great place to send us your suggestions. Also, if you would like some stickers, we do have some stickers available. Send us your address via that email address, and we will drop them in the mail for you.
And if you really enjoy the show and would like to help keep us some books and movies, you can also support us on Patreon.
Patreon. Margot, yeah, it will be this October 10 years since we started the show together. Wowza. So we have a little over 7 years worth of shows on our Patreon wall, believe it or not. So everything from 2021 and then previous to that. And we recently put up their Almost Famous, based on a Rolling Stone article. Dog Day Afternoon, Logan's Run, Legally Blonde. These are all the ones we've just recently put on our Patreon wall. And I want to say thank you to Linda, who just joined us on Patreon. Thank you, Linda. It just helps us with the cost for the show, getting the books and the movies. Another way you can help us, though, is to leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts, especially in Apple Podcasts and Spotify, because then they suggest us to other people, which would be really great. Or, ask for a sticker, put on your laptop, go to the cafe, and look really cool. Tell a friend about the show. Any of those ways, we'd be really appreciative of it.
We really do appreciate your being here. And welcome, Linda.
Yes.
To our wonderful little extra little space that we have on Patreon. Gosh, 10 years. That's amazing.
I know. That's when we met each other. And yeah.
I think we've covered just about every genre there is. One that we don't talk about very often, though, is the Great American Western. Today's is a real classic. There's two versions. We're going to be focusing more on the more recent version of 3:10 to Yuma. But let's talk a bit about our author, Elmore Leonard. When I always think of Elmore Leonard, I often associate him with the 1950s. And it's not until I started re-examining his bio that I realized how influential he is well into the 21st century. He's a big deal.
Yes. So Elmore John Leonard Jr. was born October 11th, 1925 in New Orleans. And he lived to be 87. He spent most of his life in the Detroit area of Michigan. He was a World War II veteran. He wrote crime novels, Get Shorty, Rum Punch, Out of Sight. Then we have Justified, which won the Peabody Award. They made a TV series based on his work. He puts humor in his work, and he writes with an economy of words. He says anything that's extra, he takes out of it. That's his whole spiel. He was a huge influence on movies. I remember watching Get Shorty in a movie theater, and that was my first time having Elmore James in my brain. We talked about Out of Sight, that's on our Patreon wall. A fascinating human. Won the Edgar Allan Award, the Peabody
so many awards.
National Book. I mean, he's just a fascinating person. And he was working at an ad agency, which we find quite often, especially in the 50s and 60s.
It comes up a lot.
Yeah.
If you were a creative man
yes.
in that time, that was, because writers, it's hard to make a living as a writer. But if you are a creative person who was good with words, that's exactly what the advertising industry is looking for.
Absolutely. And that's what he was doing. And he's married and he had kids. He had 5 kids with his first wife. He would write these stories and they'd be 4,000 words, and he would get $100 for them if they were printed in the pulp magazines at the time. So this is 1953 when this is released, and $100 in 1953 was a lot of money. That could pay your rent that month. So he started writing them. This was in Dime Western magazine in March of 1953. Sorry, I was telling Margot off the air that on Audible, they have a version of this with Henry Rollins reading this story. It's really cool, I have to say.
That sounds amazing to me.
And we were talking, we were both fans of the 90s of his spoken words. I collected them. I had a bunch of those on CD and cassette. Yeah, he's pretty amazing. So this is the basic story, and it's a morality play. It's about 2 men that are in a hotel room, and one of them is taking the 3:10 to Yuma, which is a train that's going to take him so that he will be on trial for robbing the trains. And so
Correct.
Their trains was this major form of transportation in the States. The intercontinental trains coming through was a big deal. It changed the economy of the country. People started traveling. And also, robbers got the idea there's a lot of money on these things. And so the Pinkerton gang was this private detective company. They were like a private police you could hire.
Yes.
And
I was going to say, they were renowned as security guards, detectives. There's I think I brought it up when we talked about Sherlock Holmes, but there's a wonderful book called The Napoleon of Crime. it's a bio of a criminal called Adam Worth, I think was his name. And he was a criminal mastermind. And he is the man who Professor Moriarty, Sherlock Holmes's arch nemesis, is based on.
Oh.
And the man who eventually brings Adam Worth to justice is, I don't remember if his name is Pinkerton, but he's like one of the founding people of the Pinkerton company. And so it was kind of on his reputation that we have these Pinkerton guards and detectives who were sort of like the gold standard of security at this time in the United States.
They were paid a fortune, and because these robber barons owned the train companies, by the way. But you were talking about when you're talking about crime, and it could be interstate or it could be between states or out of state or whatever.
It could be international as well, because this is set right at the Mexico border where Arizona meets Mexico, at a time where the border is a very kind of fluid thing. The trains, I think, kind of wove in and out of the two countries, if I remember correctly. And also something that is touched on in the book, and when we get into the movie, we'll talk about it a little bit more, but one of the big differences, I think, between the book and the movie is the way that they talk about where this is set. Mm-hmm. So and also we should say, like, if you've only ever seen the 2007 movie, very different. The actual story begins with our fugitive already in custody. Mm-hmm. So we already have the two guys. And they've already kind of been hanging out for a little bit. They are hanging out near Bisbee, Arizona, which I have been to a couple of times.
Have you?
I have. But one of the things about that part of the country at that time is that it was a very, very, really rather cosmopolitan little town in the middle of the Arizona desert because of the copper mining industry. It was a very, very rich copper mine area right there. And so Bisbee, contrary to what we see in the movie, Bisbee is quite a little boom town. It's got its own stock exchange. It's got like an opera house.
What?
It's quite, and if you go, and I highly recommend, if you are looking for kind of an old out west vacation adventure, maybe you want to see, what do you call that? The OK Corral.
Mm-hmm. Tombstone.
Tombstone, thank you. Keep going. Go visit it. Yes, go to Tombstone, but keep going and book your stay in Bisbee. You will not be sorry. It's a very fun, kind of kooky, artistic enclave today, but lots of the same buildings and all of that history of this exact time that we're talking about. And even like the brothels. Yeah. You can go and tour all of these historic sites. So it's not like a dusty little 2-horse town like we see in the movie. It is quite a sophisticated little gem of a city in the middle of nowhere, really. So it's not surprising then that we have this Pinkerton guard, you have this law enforcement infrastructure that's going on there. There's a lot of wealth, is what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. And so they have the resources to protect what they have. And so the story opens, the actual story opens, as I said, with I think his name is Kid in the story, the fugitive, or no, not the fugitive, he's caught. The criminal, he is already in custody, and he's already in custody up against quite a formidable, like I say, infrastructure of law enforcement and asset protection. Very different than the impression that we get in the film. So it's a little bit different scenario.
Their names are different, so that's a little bit like it takes a little getting used to. So it's Paul Scallon is the deputy marshal, and it's Jimmy Kidd is the robber, and they're in this hotel room. And it's basically, we're also almost like the scorpion, the frog, which we've talked about. It's sort of like they're going by their natures. Like one of them is a thief and the other one's a nice man with a family. And he's going to get $200 if he puts this man on a train that's going to get him to trial in Yuma. And he'll also most likely be executed. He will be hung for what he's done. And whether or not he agrees with that, that's not in the equation. It's making sense to him because, this is the job I'm being paid to do. And his word is his honor. And even though he maybe even kind of likes this person, because they're hanging out in this hotel room and just, what's there to do? You just talk.
Yeah. You just talk to each other. There's no internet, there's
no radio,
no books,
no
nothing
books,
like that.
No.
So they talk to each other and they develop something of a rapport over the course of the story. The other kind of looming unknown element is Charlie Prince, who is Kid's kind of second in command, sort of his henchman, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And he is kind of the guy who is in charge of Kid's gang while Kid is in custody. And we don't know, when we're reading the story, we don't know where exactly this gang is, when they might turn up,
mm-hmm.
how much damage they might do, how dangerous they actually are. We know they're not afraid of killing people, but we don't know when or where they could jump scare and really do a lot of damage, kill Scallon and free Kid. And so that's kind of the tension that's going on in the story.
Mm-hmm.
But really, they're just sitting around waiting for a train.
It's two men. One of them has a job. They both have jobs that they're doing. And one job is to take the other one to the train and then make sure that he's going to be convicted for his crimes. They get to talking, and then there's just outside the hotel room, so that we do have Charlie Prince. He's in charge of that gang. There's also other people in town that are wondering what's going on. So then Charlie is basically sort of like, hey, there's a guy here and he's got a lot of money, and whoever helps me out, you'll make this much money. And so they're surrounded. And it's lawless. I mean, people have guns and just spoilers, by the way, we do give away what happens. So spoiler is that they do get away and they get onto the train. And it's not easy, but they do it. And
there's a lot of shooting.
Mm-hmm.
But they do ultimately they do make it on to the train. They defeat the gang, and the two men eventually find themselves on the 310 to Yuma.
And he just sort of says to the other one, like, I guess I earned my $200. And he's kind of like, yeah, you just did. And it can be confusing, but, $200 in the 1880s when this takes place, it's about 20 years after the Civil War. That's about $6,000. What we're learning about is also that he really needs this money. And he has a family, and there's a drought, and he owes money. So that's the story, the basic story. It's 1953. Also at this time, in the 50s in America, and my parents grew up in the 50s in America, and they were talking about there were always Westerns on TV. It was because it was inexpensive. These deserts are close to California, Los Angeles, so they could go out there and film stuff and then come back. So there are a lot of morality tales. They were very popular. There's World War II stories, and then there was Westerns, my dad said. Like, that's like...
Basically, yeah. I mean, and Bonanza ran...
Right.
It's still like the longest running television.
I think till 1970. Yeah. Like, it's definitely through the whole 60s.
So we talked a little bit about this when we talked about Duel, the Steven Spielberg movie with the truck. That if you go less than an hour out of Los Angeles until fairly recently, you got a real dupe for the Old West. Mm-hmm. You were in the mountains of, like where Thousand Oaks, Calabasas, where the Kardashians live now. This is where a lot of these Westerns were shot. And like Margos said, it's an easy morality play. Good guys, bad guys. Mm-hmm. Lots of guns, lots of action, lots of chasing. And there you go. And built-in entertainment. You watched the
1957.
Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I haven't seen it at all.
Absolutely. So this is where they bring out the story, and it's Glenn Ford it's now Ben Wade and Dan Evans that are our two leads. So Glenn Ford is the bad guy. Ben Wade is the bad guy. Van Heflin plays Dan Evans. He's fantastic. So Van Heflin, Dan is on a farm, and he's very, very broke. He owes money on the land because they've been through a drought for several years. And so what they do is they add that whole story about you meet him and you meet his family. He has 2 sons. He has a wife. He owes a lot of money.
So interesting. So it sounds like a lot of the things that are in this version that we watched were actually taken from the 1957 adaptation. So a lot of these extra elements and backstory came in that version that early.
Right. So what we do is like we meet Ben's family. Dan's family. There's a gang, and they have a stagecoach. They have robbers through. They're going through town. He's given this opportunity to make this money in order to pay off the loan that he has. He has a very understanding wife, but she's nervous. He has a son that's sick. So that what they do is they add this whole preamble of like how he finds out this group. And then Dan, and then he is on this mission to take this guy to Yuma. And then his gang is now following him. So we have all these extra people in here, and they're going to Contention, which is the town where they're going to catch the 310 to Yuma.
Oh, interesting.
And it's very, 1950s hair. On like 19, and then they have like little buttons on there. I mean, it's very, it's Glenn Ford is playing against type. He's playing the bad guy. And I think like for all of it, I think he's kind of the weakest part. I mean, I think like,
I know it's kind of hard. He's such a type, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's many of the same beats. But it's about like how he finds him, and then what they add to it is that he's going to take him to Yuma. But then it turns out there's like several different people following them. There's the police that they're gangsters that are following them. There's also people that are Ben's side, and then there's people that are on the law side. They're constantly being chased by people. So at one point they're going to go back to Dan's house, and it's a decoy. And so he brings him over to the house, and that's and he's there with like two other guys. There's the doc, and then there's another guy that's a part of their trio. He comes to the house, and they find out when they're sitting at dinner that he's actually educated and he knows the Bible, and he flirts with the wife.
Interesting.
And so he has him like cut his food for him and stuff like that. So all of that tracks. And in the movie, spoiler, at the end, they do have the shootout. And at the end, they actually do get on the train together and they head to Yuma together. Oh,
I see. Interesting.
So they keep that sort of uplifted kind of ending. I mean, there's a lot of shooting, and like Americans didn't have a problem with this. Like, you can't have sex, you can't show any skin,
but you can shoot.
The crap out of anybody. Yeah. So there's a lot of like shooting, but it's a good story. I mean, it's really beautifully filmed. It is a really
good story. That's so cool.
Felicia Farr is the barmaid that he has the affair. He has a thing going on with. She's still alive. 1932. She was born 1932. So it's an interesting cast. It's really beautifully shot. It's nice. It's lovely to look at, and it's an hour and a half. It's like a really great little Western. It's great. It's just I was saying to Margot before, I watched the 2007 version. And then I watched the 1957 version. And then last night I decided I'm just going to put the 2007 version on again and just see how I feel. And then I loved it even more the second time. I liked it even more the second time, maybe.
Yeah. So just to be clear, in the original story, there are no women, y'all. It's just, there's not a single woman in that story. So I don't think, as I recall. So very, very different. But I get it. We're adapting. We need to have a little bit of backstory about these guys.
Right.
We need to know a little bit something about them. Oh, that's very, very interesting, though. I was curious about how they handled that.
What they did is they have the wife. So they have the wife a part of the story from the beginning. And then in the 2007 version, he travels with his 17-year-old son, who's I love that relationship, and I like that in the movie. In the 57 version, it's the wife that actually follows him to the train station.
Oh,
I know.
Interesting.
It's bizarre. And then at the end, they're going off on Yuma. All of a sudden, you hear this thunder. And then as they're on the train and they're taking off, she's on a horse. And then all of a sudden she has like a cap on. She has a robe, a hood on her robe. She takes the hood down because she's enjoying the rain. And she sees her husband. She's like, hey, you're on the train. You got your $200 and it's raining now. Isn't this awesome? And he's like, yeah, sure is. And he's waving to her.
Yeah, great. Who's watching the kids?
Exactly.
You do know our youngest is sick.
You know, you're on a train with a murderer, but okay. I guess that's how it ends. It's pretty great. It is pretty great. I will say that. But the 2007 version, it comes out exactly 50 years after the first one. So I guess it is time. We have James Mangold is our director, was in the business for years. He started as a writer. He actually wrote the story for Oliver and Company, which is that movie with Billy Joel songs. Originally, so there was this idea of resurrecting this because every few years there's a Western that does really well, and so they're like, why don't we make more Westerns? People like Westerns, and then the Westerns don't do well, and then people don't make them anymore. But in 2005 they were all on board, and they were going to have Tom Cruise play Ben Wade, and then Eric Bana was going to play the Dan part. And then Tom Cruise, he was promoting the Steven Spielberg movie that we were just talking about, War of the Worlds. And he was jumping over Oprah's couch, and then he had all this bad publicity. So then they decided we maybe don't want him for 3:10 to Yuma. So that's when they got Russell Crowe. And then once they got Russell Crowe, they brought in Christian Bale, and then it was all kind of fluffed out. And they have basically it's the same story here. Should we play the trailer and then talk about this 2007 film? Okay, so here's this 2007 trailer for 3:10 to Yuma.
Probably cheaper just to let me rob the damn thing.
See which way you rode, Evans?
Like they were headed to Bisbee.
Hands up.
22 robberies, over $400,000 in losses.
Y'all notice he didn't mention any of the lives I've taken.
We will have Ben Wade convicted and hanged, and we will pay to make it happen. I'll come.
So, boys, where are we headed?
Taking it at 3:10 to Yuma day after tomorrow.
Shouldn't have told him that.
Relax, friend. Now, if we get separated, I know where to meet up.
It's a killer, Daniel.
And someone ought to have the decency to bring him to justice.
I want to come with you.
Well, you can't.
What are you doing out here, Dan? You got a family to protect.
Don't talk to me like you know me, Wade. We ain't friends.
I told you to stay home.
I left home.
You turn around right now. Your boy ain't protecting you. He's following me.
You say one more word, I'll cut you down right here.
I like this side of you, Dan. You're so sure that your crew's coming to get you.
They're lost without him, like a pack of dogs without a master.
Where'd they take him?
I don't know. Get me out of here!
Sure as God's vengeance, they're coming.
Coming this way, I've seen him.
There's gotta be 30, 40 more guns out there now.
Monster, you in there?
Sorry, mister, but I'm not gonna die here today.
It's just you left, Dan. Just you and your boy.
This town's gonna burn! Call him off.
Why should I?
Because you're not all bad.
Yes, I am.
You just remember that your old man walked Ben Wade to that station when nobody else would.
This cast is pretty spectacular.
You know, it's very impressive. I think even the kid is very good.
Logan Lerman?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's so good. So we have Russell Crowe as Ben Wade, Christian Bale is Dan, Logan Lerman is William, his son. Dallas Roberts plays Butterfield, who's great.
He's like the company representative. He's the money guy.
Yeah, he works for the Southern Pacific Railroad. Ben Foster as Charlie Prince is next level great.
He's evil.
He's so evil. He's great. Peter Fonda is in this movie.
He's fantastic.
He's so good.
He's so good in this.
He's the bounty hunter that works for the Pinkertons. He's shot in the stomach and just keeps going. Like
He's fine. He's fine.
And apparently that happened in real life. Peter Fonda accidentally shot himself when he was a kid. I worked on. I never told you this. I worked on Peter Fonda's autobiography. I got to meet him like 20 years ago. He was very nice. He accidentally shot himself in the stomach, and he just barely lived. So that's.
Wow.
Yeah. Vanessa Shaw plays Emma. She's the barmaid. Alan Tudyk is Doc Potter, who's so good.
He's really good in this. It's such a good cast.
Amazing cast. Gretchen Mol is Alice, Dan's wife. She's great. Luke Wilson plays Zeke. Kevin Durand is this ranch hand. And there's a man named Hollander that we meet. And Hollander is the person that owns the farm. And it's much more spelled out in our 2007 movie. But what happens when we open the film is that they're on their ranch. A building burns down. And that's because the people that own the land burned it down because he owes them money.
Right.
And he's saying, like, well, if you burn my land down, then I can't make money for you. So this is kind of like, but
so like, what are we doing here?
But it turns
out the guy's just trying to take the land.
He wants to take the land because he's going to get bought out by the railroad company. That are going to, which is what happened across America, which still happens. What do they call it? Something domain, when you can just
eminent domain.
Eminent domain. So he finds out that the landlord wants to kick him out. He doesn't want him to make money, and he doesn't want to move. And we find out that Christian Bale is limping because he's missing a foot, or he has a badly injured foot, and he has two kids. He has two sons, and the older son is very mouthy towards him. There's some contempt that you can see from the younger son.
Doesn't have a lot of respect for his dad.
Right. And he's like, how come we're hungry? Why are we poor? You could treat mom better. You know, he's really disappointed in his father. And Christian Bale is such a great actor. Like, you're just like heartbroken for him.
You really are. You know, I was saying before we got on the air, you know, I read this story, and then not knowing anything about any of the adaptations, I'd never seen this film before. I'm watching this movie and I'm like, oh, okay, well, we have to have a whole backstory. Like I said, there's all of it. For opening shot is Gretchen Mol, and I'm like, oh, there's a woman now? Okay. And so I was like, I don't know about this thing. And I got to tell you, they won me over.
Yeah.
They really did. I really found myself rooting for this guy. And Christian Bale it's a really good performance. You really see his conflict, and he's trying so hard to be someone that his family can be proud of.
Right.
But in doing so, he has to make choices that end up making it harder for his family to survive. We still have, like, the little boy, there's the younger son who's sick. And like I said, it's different than in the story also. So he's in this kind of two-horse town. There's not a lot of infrastructure, you know, so it's ripe for the railroad to come and snap it up. It is not Bisbee. So Bisbee, as I said, was a thriving, lots of money flowing in and out, you know, with the miners and everything. It's not really that. The Bisbee that's in the movie is not the Bisbee that existed at that time at all. So in the movie, it's this kind of very small town. Nobody wants to risk escorting this very, very, very dangerous criminal. You know, it just seems like an open invitation to get yourself shot, basically. But he is desperate. He wants to save this farm. He wants to save his family, and so he volunteers to take this job. I really it really grew on me. The backstory really grew on me. Of course, he would have had history in the Civil War. We know that his foot being shot off or whatever happened to it, amputated for whatever reason, has something to do with the war, but we don't know what the circumstances were exactly. But we do know that he was an expert shot.
Right.
He is an expert gunsman, and as is his teenage son. So he goes off. He's like, okay, son, you stay behind. You got to be the man around here. I'm going to go do this thing. And then we can all kind of put this behind us and buy our farm back, and everything's going to be great. And of course, this is my one thing, is like, of course the son is like, nope, I'm going to sneak off behind you.
Right.
And going to join you for this adventure, which is fine. But like, nobody seems at all concerned that we are leaving Gretchen Mol to run this entire farm by herself with a sick child.
Right.
And these vigilantes have just burned down your barn with your livestock in it. And we're just fine. We're just going to leave. She'll handle it. She'll be fine. She'll be fine. Nobody seems to give the slightest concern to the fact that we have just heaped this gigantic burden on this woman. I mean, if it were me, I'm taking the little guy I'm starting a new life someplace else. I'm just telling everybody I'm a war widow or whatever I need to say.
I'm going to San Francisco or New York.
Something.
I'm going to a city and I'm going to figure it out. Yeah, he has TB.
Like, we're not worried about her.
Yeah, the son has tuberculosis.
Yeah, he has TB.
Yeah, so they have to. There's money they need for medicine for this poor kid, and they had to move to this climate, this arid climate, because that's the best for him because he's coughing all the time and he's sick all the time. Christian Bale, when he takes home Russell Crowe to his family, to have dinner with his family, and then Russell Crowe is sitting there and he's kind of like he's talking Bible verses once again, and he's like kind of making eyes for the wife, and he's just telling, boy, you're lucky you have like a really hot wife here, too bad she's alone with this kid and you're broke and all this stuff. But him and his son and another there's a lot of guys, they're going to take Russell Crowe.
It's a lot of men.
It's a lot of men fighting men.
Your time with Gretchen Mol because
and Vanessa Shaw, who's beautiful.
Yeah, it's very brief.
Yeah.
And then it's the boys' club.
Wade's horse.
Take the back. We'll take the front.
What the hell are they looking for?
Ben Wade, he held up the payroll coach. I want to talk, Mr. Hollander.
Ben Wade and Bisbee. Shit. We're moving up.
Mr. Hollander?
Tucker, going to the saloon.
You got no right to do what you done. You hear me? That's my land.
Come next week, it's not Evans. You borrowed a good deal of money, and I got rights to recompense.
But you dammed up my creek. You shut off my water. How'd you expect me to pay off my debts if you can't let me?
Before water touches your land, it resides and flows on mine. Go home and pack up.
Can you just let me get to spring? I can turn the corner.
Sometimes a man has to be big enough to see how small he is. Railroad's coming down. Your land's worth more with you off it.
Peter Fonda is the Pinkerton guy. So in the movie versions, just to be clear, in the movie versions, our criminal has robbed a stagecoach and shot the Pinkerton guard that was on the stagecoach. So he's recovering from his gunshot wound, but he's Peter Fonda, so he's fine.
Yeah.
And
nothing he hadn't been through before.
No, he can handle it. Easy rider. He's easy rider. So we have a doctor who's going along.
A vet.
And a vet who's the vet, but that's as good as that's a doctor.
That's a doctor, yeah.
And we have our Mr. Butterfield, the money guy, and we have the hired gunman, the hired guard, which is our Christian Bale. And so those men are taking Russell Crowe, and Russell Crowe, I really like. Oh, there's an additional guy who's along for some reason, and he's watching Russell Crowe at night, and he's singing this song, and he's bothering Russell Crowe, and Russell Crowe, cut to Russell Crowe like stabbing this guy in the throat, even though he's handcuffed. So we get to see he is a ruthless killer
with a fork. The fork he got from the dinner table.
Yeah, do not be charmed by Russell Crowe's affable, hanging out and having a beer kind of energy. He will stab you in the throat with a fork if you don't stop singing when he asks you to.
Gonna hang me in the morning, for the night is done. You're gonna hang me in the morning, I'll never see the sun.
I suppose it's too much to ask for a little quiet.
Well, the way I figured it, is I'd be asleep in my own bed right now if it weren't for you. So if I gotta be up, well then, you're damn well gonna be up with me too. Ben Wade. They're gonna hang me in the morning, for the night is done. Hang me in the morning, I'll never see the sun.
Son of a bitch!
Enough! Enough!
It's enough, McAvoy.
We have to bury him.
Take the time to dig one grave. Might as well dig one for yourself. Let's go. Mount up.
You wanna hang me in the morning? I never see the sun.
So we get these glimpses into everybody's character. The doctor, we know, is a man of absolute utmost integrity. He believes in, saving lives, and that's what he's there to just make sure everything is safe and okay. All of this is to say, we are, no joke, 1 hour into this film before we are at the beginning of the actual story, Mr. Elmore Leonard's story. Before we were anything that even remotely resembles the story of the original source material, it's an hour has gone by of backstory and who these men are and what kind of men are they and what is the backdrop and all of that. So then we have this rollicking romp through America in this part of the 19th century after the Civil War in the Old West, which is lawless. So they encounter this crew of Chinese railroad workers, and it turns out that the guy who's running this project, the project manager, if you will, is someone who Charlie Wade's killed the guy's brother. So he's got a real beef with our criminal, and he wants to be the guy to take. He doesn't want Wade to ever face justice. He wants to be the justice. So they have this whole face off with these guys, and they have to get away. That's where Luke Wilson is here. Luke Wilson is
Zeke.
Okay. Zeke, of course, is Zeke.
Yeah, of course, yes.
They go to this other town, which is where they're going to catch the train.
Contention,
thank you. Which I think that's in the story. I think that's where they're going in the story, right?
Yeah, so they create for the movies. In the 1957 movie, we get the wife and the home, and you find out how he got this gig in the first place, and then they pretty quickly go to the hotel, whereas in the 2007 movie, they have the other adventure. So there's a whole point where they're attacked by an Apache tribe. And then, like Margos said, they're going through a Chinese labor camp.
Yeah.
It's a little more realistic, I think, like what was actually happening at that time.
It very much is.
That is exactly what happened. And now they're in the hotel. So this whole scene is like the last part of the movie. And it's terrifying, if you ask me. I mean, they're in a situation.
Really could it be more tense?
I mean,
and we also have established, we've also been simultaneously watching Charlie Prince, who's the the second in command of the gang, and the gang, who are just animals.
Right.
We have seen them just ruthlessly slaughter people just because they're standing between me and that door. You know, just who poses zero threat whatsoever, just for funsies and practice.
Right.
They have no qualms about just slaughtering an entire town as they make their way trying to find their boss and free him. And so that tension is building and building and building. Whereas in this story, again, it's just that we sort of hear about them.
Right.
And we know they're out there, and we know they're ruthless killers. We don't actually see them mowing people down right, left, and center, like all over the Old West, like we do in this film. It's a lot of shooting.
Morning, Pinkerton. Name's Charlie Prince. I expect you heard of me.
Well, I heard of a balled-up whore named Charlie Princess. That you, Missy?
I hate Pinkertons.
Byron McElroy. Lend your ear to an old gray Byron.
Oh, gotta help, Ben Wade.
Well, would you look at all this? Y'all spared no expense this time, Byron. I gotta say, though, it's probably cheaper just to let me rob the damn thing.
You're gonna kill me. Just as soon get to it.
I ain't gonna kill you. Not like this.
Won't change a thing. Let me live. I'll come for you.
I'd be disappointed if you didn't.
He's wet. He's wet.
I think this is done really well, I have to say. They're holed up in this hotel. They're trying to get him out of sight because they don't want to cause havoc in the town, because everybody knows who this guy is and knows that he's a ruthless killer and knows that he has a gang that have no qualms. They will come in and kill the whole town just to get to him. So they're holed up in this hotel. Dan's teenage son shows up and he's like, "I'm here to help, Dad." And he's like, "Dude, what are you doing here? Get out of here."
But he's a sure shot. He needs him.
He does need him. He does help. And then we also have Butterfield, the money guy, is also there. Butterfield goes to get the sheriff of the town. They're gonna they're gonna kind of get this thing on lock so they can get the guy on the train. But then, of course, his gang shows up, and there they are. They're out in the square in front of the hotel. They know exactly what's going to happen. They know he's going to get on the train. Someone already has squealed to them about the whole plan. And here they are. What are they going to do? And they don't quite do what we think they're going to do, what we've been told throughout the film they're going to do. It's simply kill everybody in the town so that they can then free their friend. But what they do instead, and I think this is very good, is they offer money to anybody in the town who may want to join them and make a few $100 in the Old West. And guess what? Everybody does.
They could all use the money.
So now the whole town is part of Wade's gang, which I think I was like, oh, I didn't see that coming.
I'll get you on that train, Wade. Stubborn back!
Boy's gone, hero. Ain't nobody watching no more. Still got that one good leg. Why don't you use it to get on home? Charlie! Charlie Prince! Yeah, boss! Hold your fire! I'm walking out!
I had never been
No hero, Wade. Only battle I seen. We was in retreat. My foot got shot off by one of my own men. You try telling that story to your boy. See how he looks at you then.
I was very impressed.
Charlie, we need to say once again, and Ben Foster is amazing. There's a scene where there's a person that's traveling in a cage, and he tells him the plan, and he's saying to him, like, we're going to set you on fire unless you tell us. That he tells them, then they set him on fire anyway. Like, this is a bad dude. So now we're getting to what the gist of like the story was in the original short story, and now here it is on film. And so they're talking to one another. They're getting to know each other, and he's asking, and Wade is like, dude, what are you even doing? You have this beautiful wife. You have 2 great kids. Like, take this because a couple of times he's offered $200 to just leave. Like, you got far enough. Like,
Russell Crowe grows to really admire Christian Bale's character throughout the film. And he actually is genuinely trying to help this guy. He realizes, like, my gang is going to come. They're not going to care. They're going to shoot you before I even tell them not to. This is not going to end well for you. How about I'll just give you some money,
How much
and you
would
can
it
just
take?
say, what do you need?
Right.
You can just say I escaped. And Christian Bale's like, nope.
He says to him, I'll give you $200. I'll give you $400. I'll give you $1,000. This is a lot of money for that time. And he just won't do it because at this point, once again, we're going back to the scorpion and the frog. Like no.
Yeah.
I said I was going to do this. I'm going to complete a thing. And that's his whole journey. You find out that he served in the Civil War for the North, but the company is based in the South, or vice versa. The company,
he was fighting in the South, but he was fighting for the North.
He was fighting for the North, but the company is based in Chicago. So they're like, okay, that tracks. That's all right. We'll pay you. But you find out that he was shot by one of his own crew, like his own army buddies.
They were in retreat, and somebody in his own unit shot him, and that's how he lost his foot, we learned.
And he said, and this part kills me because he and Wade have like a showdown on their way to the train, and Wade is going to strangle him. But Wade's not going to do it because they've been friends. But he even looks at him and he just says, that's what happened. Like, that's how I lost my foot. And goes, you tell me how that feels to tell your son that story. And Russell Crowe is just like, oh man, this poor guy. He's just.
So then, just like in the original story, our criminal wants his captor to succeed, and he's like, okay, let's do it. Let's make you a success.
He says to him also, I broke out of Yuma twice, so send me to Yuma. I don't care. I'll get out.
Yeah.
But take your money then. Like, all right, let's do this together. So their whole thing is they're gonna, and it's scary. It's terrifying. They're snipers all over the place. And his son is there, and he's trying to provide some backup. The poor kid. And so then he puts him on the train. And of course, like the second he puts him on the train, he gets shot and he's dying. And then his poor son witnesses this, William, and he has to like come over and talk to his dad. And Russell Crowe is basically just destroyed by this whole sacrifice this guy gave for nothing. I mean, he didn't even get the $200. His William says to him, you did it, Dad. Like, as his dad is dying, like, you did it.
Yeah.
That one thing you were going to do. And then Russell Crowe turns right around and kills all of his posse.
His own gang.
His entire gang. Like, boom, 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 boom.
Yeah.
And that's the end of the movie.
I haven't had that experience lately where I watch a film and I'm like, and then by the end,
I know
I'm totally won over. I'm all in. Yeah, I just was very impressed with this film. Really enjoyed it. It's a great Western. Yeah, I although I guess my one beef is like, why is nobody concerned about what the burden we've placed on Gretchen Mol back at the farm
with
her
woman's
sick
burden.
son?
I know. I also wanted to say that in the several times when I was watching the original version, I was like, oh, nowadays I watch Mel Brooks movies and I'm like, oh, this comes from a thing. And Blazing Saddles, there's so many parts of 3:10 to Yuma that you can go, oh, that's why they did that in Blazing Saddles. And in Blazing Saddles, Frankie Lane famously sang the title song, and Frankie Lane sang cowboy songs for all the TV shows and stuff. And his whole thing is that he did them without any irony. Like, he sang every word like it really meant something. So he wore a blazing saddle. And so for 3:10 to Yuma, it's a Frankie Lane song that they use.
There is a lonely train called the 3:10 to Yuma. The pounding of the wheels is more like a mournful sigh. There's a legend and there's a rumor. When you take the 3:10 to Yuma, you can see the ghosts of outlaws go riding by.
It's terrific.
It is good. It's great. It's really, really fantastic. I mean, the thing with this movie that kind of hurt their chances is that they were competing with, there was a Jesse James movie that was with Brad Pitt.
Yeah.
And I think they came out the same day.
Oh.
And that's the movie. And that movie, I can't sit there. I find it so boring. But that was
I've never seen it.
It's not great. It's a really long title. I don't care. But
and also No Country for Old Men.
Right.
It swept everything.
And that's on our list. We'll definitely get to it one of these days. It's on there. But yeah, I think in any other year, like, I was like, why aren't all these performances nominated for Oscars? Because they're all really good.
Yeah.
It was nominated for sound and music, which are
good.
Great.
It's very good sound and very good. And the music is like just enough, doesn't hit you over the head.
Right.
All of the whole production design, I was very impressed with in that way, even though it's not historically completely accurate. In terms of forwarding the narrative that we have here, it's perfect. Like the hotel that they're holed up in, when they go to the railroad camp, the Evans's farmhouse, and all, like, it's just enough. They're not being too precious about it, but they're definitely like giving you the backdrop that you need. And I think I was very, very impressed with like the light touch of the art direction in this. I thought was just right, just the perfect approach.
Yeah, it's a great movie. I really enjoyed it. So it was competing with those other ones. So book versus movie.
Oh, it's hard to say because they are very different. They have similar stakes, but I feel like the stakes are kind of a different nature in the book than in the movie. But I am going to say that I guess I'll give it to the movie just because I really enjoyed those two men.
Yeah.
The bromance, Crowe and Bale, that develops over the course of the film is very fun, very entertaining.
They're great actors.
Yeah, they're really super good.
They're really good. They're at their top of their game. I would say, like, and I had a couple of people kind of push back to me on Twitter saying that they liked the 1957 version better, but I think that Glenn Ford isn't I don't buy him so much as a villain.
It's harder, yeah.
I think if James Dean were in that part, it would have been amazing.
Mm-hmm.
But, you can't change those things. I really enjoyed it. I think it's a really smart movie, and it's unexpected, and it goes in places I wasn't quite sure of. And all of the acting is just top notch. And
it's such a good cast. All of the character actors, all of those minor people, like the guy that gets stabbed in the throat with the fork.
Yeah. Just
is
singing.
really good.
I loved the jacket that Ben Foster wears that, it's so badass.
Good wardrobe. It's good.
Amazing. It's really strong. I really enjoyed it.
And you do get more in the movie than in the original story, although it is there. Very often, this is my beef with the American mid-century, mid-20th century Westerns is that you don't get, like you do in this film, a taste of how much the Civil War was still kind of reverberating everywhere. Like every single man of a certain age would have fought in the war. And just like we see in the film, like you didn't know when you encountered a man who was your age, which side he was on in the war. You knew he fought because he's alive still. He would definitely have fought, but for which side and under what circumstances, and that's something that would always be very much top of mind whenever you were meeting somebody for the first time, meeting a man for the first time who was over, the age of whatever 20. You would know, oh, he's also a veteran. I wonder what his deal is. Yeah, which side?
And it was a bloody war, and it was the war that prosthetics were developed around this time because of the industrialism. So some people that would have died before lived, but they lived without limbs or like what's going on with Christian Bale. So that's something you could see everywhere. And America since then, thankfully, knock wood, has had wars not here, but someplace else. So in the 50s, there was this leftover from World War II, but they went someplace else. So they come back to America, and you don't
different.
See
you don't
it
think
everywhere.
of it that way, right? And not everybody went,
right?
So it was very different, yeah. And so all of this was to say, like, so when you see that amazing coat that he has on, it sort of looks like, oh, maybe that's left over from when he was in. So you see a lot of these like older, roughed up things that look like they were Civil War era.
Yeah.
Because you would keep something like that. You would continue to wear it. Yeah, I just loved all
They didn't
that
have
stuff.
disposable fashion, y'all. I mean,
No.
you couldn't just get a pair of pants. Like it was, you had to go through stuff. I mean, that scene where he's trying to sell that trinket, there's just so many.
Oh, it's so sad.
He plays pathetic so well. And Christian Bale is so handsome. And like, we know him as Batman and so many other things, but they're all.
It's good. It's such good casting.
It really is.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Won me over.
Oh, I'm glad you enjoyed it.
So movie for you too then.
Yes. I'm going to say the movie, and I really enjoyed the 2007 version.
So let's talk about what we're doing next. We're taking a hard right.
Yes, we are. What are we doing, Margo? I just forgot. It popped out of my head all of a sudden.
We're doing something that's based on a play. So as we said, we talk about movies as long as it's adapted from any kind of literary source, we will consider it. Because y'all, it's been 10 years. And yes, there are many, many films that have been adapted from books, but some of them are just too damn long.
That's the thing we need to mention, yeah.
That's another thing, is we try to do one every week, right? So we can only do Joylet Club, every now and again. So we're talking about a movie that's been adapted from a play, and it is, talk about groundbreaking. We're going to be talking about a movie called Born Yesterday, starring a very, very underrated, because sadly we lost her kind of early, very underrated American brilliant actress called Judy Holliday. I haven't seen this film in a while, but it's a very sharp look at mid-century American culture. I cannot wait. I'm very excited to talk about. I haven't read the play, so I'll be reading the play for the first time. It was a hit play, but then it was a very, very successful film. Yeah, so Born Yesterday.
Just so you know, on Patreon, you can sign up for free on Patreon. For free on Patreon, we put out the clips that we have from the movie, because sometimes they won't let me post them on TikTok or Facebook or Instagram. I do post in all those places as well, so you don't have to. But if you're curious, that's where I post a lot of our clips, is on Patreon. So just sign up for free there. But please, all those places I mentioned at the top of the show, we are always looking for ideas. Our email, once again, is bookversusmoviepodcast@gmail.com. And Margo, where can they find you?
You can find me online at coloniabook.com, and all my social media callouts are at She's Nacho Mama. And where can they find you?
You can find me at brooklynfitchick.com, and that's where you can find me also for Threads and Instagram. And on TikTok and on Twitter, I'm at Brooklyn Margo. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. We'll be back soon with a new episode. Thank you so much for listening to the Book vs. Movie podcast. We're a part of the Frolic Podcast Network. You could find more podcasts you will love at frolic.media/podcasts.